So it's super, super important to make sure that your BDRs, your SDRs, your AEs are showing up in a way that your prospects and clients see you as experts. And there's different levels of expertise. The veterans on your team that have been selling in this space for 10 or 20 years in the same industry obviously have a whole next level kind of expertise. I see the BDRs and the SDRs being amazing virtual event coordinators, being amazing moderators, being amazing question answerers, and being amazing at creating and distributing templates that help to amplify this in front of the right people. I also see the SDRs and the BDRs being in an amazing position to help quarterback some of these initiatives across multiple teams within your company. A little while back, we hosted a webinar called Data Center Lead Generation 201, Getting to Decision Makers and Larger Customers. Immediately following that webinar, I hosted a bonus Q&A question and answer session that addressed some of the audience's top questions. Let's listen in now. I saw there was a couple questions that were sent in during today's webinar, and as promised, I'm going to transition now into a bonus Q&A section for today's webinar, and I'll address some of the additional questions that were sent in both ahead of time and during today's webinar. So for the company is doing some kind of thing related to telecommunications infrastructure conduits, probably equally applicable to MEP, same basic ideas. Understand your business model. Understand the kinds of companies where you've been most successful. Use that to document who they are, where they're physically located. For most companies, unless you're huge, you're probably not selling globally. You're more than likely selling in either a full continent or a country or a couple of countries, but get super specific on where you can actually service and what company size your clients are. Within operators, a lot of operators are focusing on like megawatts and square footage and density, and it's all interesting. But the reality is, if you're going to use a prospecting tool, if you're going to use something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Campaign Manager, at some point you're going to need to normalize that and convert that into a company size by headcount. For most companies in and around the data center industry, it's a Goldilocks problem of not too hot, not too cold, right? So what is the minimum company size that can afford your minimums? Like, can you really sell to a company with 1 to 10 employees or 11 to 50 employees? I don't know. Only you can answer that question. And on the upper end of the range, is there a point where the company gets so large that the procurement process, the sales cycle, the requirements are just so ridiculously complicated that they need a company that's able to do that, and you don't quite have the expertise to do that for that kind of business model? So there's a geographic component to figuring these things out. There's a company size component. LinkedIn has normalized brackets. I'd encourage you to adopt similar brackets if you're going all in on content and thought leadership around the same company size brackets that LinkedIn uses. And despite changes in the platform over the years, those have remained remarkably constant. And then the third pillar of all of that is business model industry specialization. Where that becomes an issue, especially in the technology and the operator space, is at the intersection of certain kinds of businesses, business models, industries, and geographic locations. Regulatory things pop up. And because of the nature of regulatory requirements popping up, certain companies are better suited than others to be able to work with those kinds of clients. So that's how to get dialed into at a company level what's going on. And then in terms of the individual stakeholders to build relationships with in those companies, it's a matter of looking at your CRM, your customer relationship management, and figuring out, like, okay, in these kinds of companies, who historically has been involved in the conversations pre-sales and post-sales, and then reverse engineer that into your go-to-market and your lead generation strategy. So what can we do to better differentiate our company? I think the biggest mistake that I see with companies in the data center ecosystem make when it comes to differentiation is they're only differentiating to people that already know their company exists, to people that are already in the decision stage of the buyer's journey. And that differentiation a lot of times comes down to winning awards or certain strategic hires. And those things are all good for people that are in the last 17% of the buyer's journey. But what are you going to do to differentiate your company to the much, much wider part of the sales funnel, for all the people that could be a great fit a couple weeks or a couple months from now, but are for sure not in market yet, for sure are not ready for a sales conversation yet? That's where you need a different kind of approach to differentiation that focuses on educating and building trust long before they get to the sales conversation. Because again, assuming that your company is not a startup and brand new, you probably long ago achieved product market fit and go to market fit. You know exactly the kinds of clients that you do best with. You more than likely have your differentiation for your late stage prospects and your clients and your channel partners pretty well figured out. If you have a chief product officer or vice president of product management or product team, it's their job to lose sleep over keeping up with that competitive edge and that talking to customers on a regular basis and making sure that your roadmap continues to evolve over time so that you have a strong value proposition and differentiation. What I'd be most concerned about is that first 83%. I think in the first 83%, most companies in and around the data center industry are completely dropping the ball with differentiation. And one of the best opportunities to truly differentiate is to own as many of those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision as possible. And the way that you do that is to get really dialed into who you're marketing and selling to, what they care about, and figuring out a way to show up consistently in a way that adds value to their professional lives, that adds unique insights that helps them do their job better about anything and everything that has to do with your product category and the very natural buyer's journey that your most important buyer personas are going to go through in awareness and consideration. And you figure out exactly what those topics are by doing great detailed customer insight, great detailed buyer persona research. So you get strong consensus on the 8 or 10 biggest goals they're trying to figure out, the 8 or 10 biggest challenges that they need to overcome, the stressors that are messing up their time off and they're causing vacations to be compromised. So they end up losing the peace of mind of not being able to recharge, all of those things. To the extent that you're able to add value to their professional lives as a resource, that will give you a strong point of differentiation. Because if you can get to the point where they're spending a large percentage of those 28 touch points with your team members as the go-to experts in your space, you will starve all the oxygen away from competitive alternatives. There's going to be no need for them to look to competitive alternatives to learn because you've been the definitive learning resource that's opened their eyes to how much better they could be a couple weeks, a couple months, a year or two out from now by adopting the kind of plan that you're showing works for companies just like theirs because you've shown the pattern recognition. As I briefly alluded to before, don't be afraid to infuse some of your customer case studies, your channel partner success stories into some of these educational resources. Just be mindful of the fact that of knowing where they are, where your prospects are in their journey. So early on, it should focus on a lot of education, not like, hey, you should buy from this company because they're wonderful. That you should buy from their company because they're wonderful. And traditional case studies are good for middle and late stages of the journey, but early on, they don't even know that your company exists or even your category exists. They just know there's a big goal that they're trying to figure out, a big challenge they're trying to overcome.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
For those that are new to the space and in an entry-level BDR, SDR role, business development, sales development rep role, how can we adapt the approach you mentioned in the webinar while still doing what is required of us, such as cold calling and messaging? We know and are learning about the industry, but it can be hard to position yourself as a consultant or an educator. Yeah, for sure. This is a question this is an issue that is going to be resolved above your pay grade. You can for sure bring this up and for sure bring your AEs and bring your sales directors to events like this so they're reminded of the fact that they need to modernize their playbook to set everyone up for success. But connect rates, booking meetings in the last 2-3 years with SDRs and BDRs, especially across technology buyers, has plummeted. The floor has completely fallen out, mostly because all of these AI tools I see something over the weekend that there's now 100,000 like SaaS companies using the exact same databases and the exact same tools to do cold outbound prospecting. So the differentiation um, is nearly non-existent. And because of that, the response rates have completely fallen off the cliff. That's why going forward, I see a lot of people in BDR, SDR roles transitioning into being involved in sales enabled, what would have in years past been considered like content and sales enablement and education and event kind of initiatives. I think about like how much more impactful a typical SDR or BDR might have a quota to book like 15 or 20 meetings a month. How much more impactful would it be if at least 50% of the SDR or BDR's time is spent booking and recording these amazing interviews with members of that buyer persona in target kind of companies? The key thing with all of this and what usually messes it up is if your prospects perceive that the podcast invite was just a way of luring them into a sales process, you completely sabotage your best efforts of what you're trying to do. I've had this happen to me personally with some of the big events producers in this industry where they've invited me to speak. I've gotten like 90 rooms, 90% filled up, perfect scores on the evaluations, and then you find out later on that nope, they're just trying to sell you a sponsorship the following year. If any of those folks are on this webinar, you've been outed. I won't mention specific names, but so it's super, super important to make sure that your BDRs, your SDRs, your AEs are showing up in a way that your prospects and clients see you as experts. And there's different levels of expertise. The veterans on your team that have been selling in this space for 10 or 20 years in the same industry obviously have a whole next level kind of expertise. I see the BDRs and the SDRs being amazing virtual event coordinators, being amazing moderators, being amazing question answerers, and being amazing at creating and distributing templates that help to amplify this in front of the right people. I also see the SDRs and the BDRs being in an amazing position to help quarterback some of these initiatives across multiple teams within your company, across marketers, across account managers, across product managers, across channel partner managers. But I see going forward a lot of the SDR, traditional SDR, BDR budgets and resources, they're in a fantastic position where once they've been on the job for at least a couple of months, they don't need to be on the job for a couple of years. What they're doing looks a lot more like a form of journalism, brand journalism for the company, where, okay, they have a ton of awareness of who the target accounts are. They have a ton of awareness of who these buyer personas are, because more than likely this stuff was built by your go-to-market, your marketing team long before you got there. And now it's a matter of, okay, what's going to be more effective of building relationships with these companies, doing it the way we did the last 5 or 10 years, where people are more sales allergic than ever, or having our team, our BDRs, our SDRs, our AEs show up as amazing panelists and moderators facilitating these kinds of events. And bear in mind, sure, in a perfect world, like you spend time with someone and it would be awesome if they turn naturally into someone that progresses into a sales opportunity. But with all of the promotion and repromotion and repurposing opportunities that you have, that asset in front that is now going to be promoted to not only the rest of that company, but the rest of that industry, it's entirely possible that you get the opportunity because someone that used to work with the person that you just interviewed has like a jaw drop of like, oh my gosh, that was insanely helpful. Who's this company that's doing this again? Who's sponsoring this whole thing? And that's how you end up getting the opportunity, because the know, like, and the trust transfers that way. And of course, Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Campaign Manager, the basics of account-based marketing can help facilitate all of that. But again, yeah, it's far-fetched that someone that's brand new to an industry, that's brand new to a business model, that's a couple months on the job, should be putting themselves out there as a consultant and an educator. I would lean on very heavily your leadership team, making the investments in you from a professional development perspective, your onboarding, your orientation, your upskilling, to get you up to at least a fraction of the level where some of the more veteran talent has on your team. That's a learning and development initiative, L&D initiative, more than just sales onboarding. But once that base is in place and you start to have a good, strong sense of what's the big motivations are of your most important personas and your target accounts, I see a fantastic role in repurposing that skill set into part of your OKRs, your objectives and key results, being focused on booking and coordinating these amazing interviews with awesome people in these target accounts that become an amazingly powerful magnet to attracting in more people, not only into the podcast, but just into the top of your funnel. And the podcast is basically the funnel for panel webinars, and the panel webinars are the funnel for offline events, and all of that is one big funnel into building your brand so that you're seen as the definitive go-to subject matter experts in your space. How do we find the right prospects? I think the most important thing is every company is going to have a definition of what the right prospects are for their company. And the right prospects for your company are the ones that more than likely look and appear to be very similar to where you've been most successful in the past. So this is, again, going back to the basics, looking at your case studies page, figuring out the ideal client profile, figuring out the buyer persona, and making sure that when you're doing prospecting, you're giving a lot of thought to how you can arrive early and often. I think all too often in the data center marketplace, among most of the go-to-market team, there's still most of the thought is trying to get people into sales meetings prematurely, trying to get people to look at your products and services and book a demo, schedule a tour. And those are nice to have, but it's far nicer to have when your prospects and clients have already been queued up because they've had a lot of value-added educational touch points and trust-building touch points along the way. This is all about trust. So first and foremost in your company, if you don't have a trusted culture where people on teams trust each other and they trust their managers and they trust the leadership, fix that first, because it's nearly impossible to get the marketplace to trust your team if they don't trust each other and they don't trust the company. So I don't want to get all philosophical here, but like this potentially is an HR problem, is how to create a culture so that this trust across teams makes it so people feel comfortable taking risks. Because probably one of the biggest risks at this point is ignoring everything that we've talked about today and continuing to run your sales and marketing playbook the same way you did 10 years ago when the marketplace's buyer preferences have shifted so dramatically. But in order to get your prospects and your clients to trust your team, they first have to trust each other and first have to trust themselves. And a lot of that comes down to making this decision that you're in it for the long game, that you have intense human connections within each other, good interpersonals. Some of this, there's a fierce debate going on in this country, even globally now, about how well this can be done with remote teams versus hybrid teams versus on-site teams. But at the end of the day, your teams need to trust each other before they can transfer that idea of trying to build trust in the marketplace. If you have employees, if you have team members that are just phoning it in, that have done the whole quiet quitting thing, if they're not really trusting of what you're trying to do, is going to be really difficult for that to transfer into sales and marketing results. Along the same lines, like if you ever known someone that took a sales job selling a product or service they didn't believe in, that's the first cousin of all of this. But I think in a lot of same ways, if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball, early on, there's this scene in the parking garage where Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt are having this conversation of like baseball. The people that own baseball teams are asking all the wrong questions. They think in terms of buying players, but in order to be successful, you need to actually buy wins. And in order to buy wins, you have to buy runs. That's the kind of the beginning of what's been known in Major League Baseball, sabermetrics, and it's permeated to a lot of professional sports. In order to create a winning outcome for growing your data center related company, for getting to the right decision makers and larger sales, it is all about educating and building trust. And in order for your go-to-market team members to be successful at educating and building trust with their prospects, their clients, their channel partners, other key stakeholders in your company, you need to educate and build trust internally first. So that's where I would start with all of this. And when it comes to finding new prospects, it becomes so much more natural when prospects see your company as the definitive go-to experts and consultants and teachers in your area, as opposed to having to chase them and beg for meetings. huge mindset change in looking at data center lead generation 201 and how to get to decision makers and larger sales. So glad that you were able to join us today for Data Center Lead Generation 201, how to get to decision makers and larger sales. So again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. We're thrilled that you were able to join us today for Data Center Lead Generation 201, but we really wish you tremendous success. We know that we're in a very special time in digital infrastructure and data center and critical facilities. We'd like to see everyone have an equal opportunity to do their best work and achieve a tremendous amount of impact on the space. We've provided a methodology to help people across go-to-market teams be able to do this more successfully. Hoping you have a great rest of your week. Take care now and wishing you great success.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.